Steady.
I got that recording. Do you have your Audacity recording?
No.
Okay, good thing. Good thing I asked.
I'm not ready. I lied.
Man's not ready. Abort. False. Was a false positive. Shoot.
Yeah. Okay. It's recording now.
I was gonna add Facebook this week. Oof, but now I don't want to.
Yep.
Okay, so let me see. Title is Nicholas and Kayla. Episode 10. Tenth episode hype. All right, let's go. Confirm and go live.
We didn't do our clapping.
Oh shit, go for it. 3, 2, 1. And another one more. And go. All right. Clapping.
Cool.
We got 2 claps. That should be enough for Ty, hopefully.
Yeah, we could put like 10 in there and then he can have a fun time trying to find them.
No, it's good when there's a couple in succession because it's actually easier to sync it up. We want usually you want 3, but we just did 2. So have fun with that, Ty. Anyway, we're live right now.
Indeed we are.
Yes. I'm not sure if anyone's around yet since we just went live. So we'll wait 1 second and then we'll do our intro and then we'll get into it. That'll be the plan.
Cool.
I wanted to link it in activity.
I'm saying more words because Ty said he needs to check my audio.
Saying more words. Did I probably need to turn you up?
That's always the case.
I guess I could turn you up here instead. There we go. Like that, perhaps.
I'm talking more now.
I think that's good enough. Hopefully.
Cool.
Ty, if you could send out the notification as well, mostly because I didn't prep it. That'd be great if you could send it in activity feed. Thanks. And all right, let's go from there. So, hello and welcome to the NativShark Podcast. I'm your host, Caleb, brought to you with co-host Nicholas. Today, we are brought to you, sponsored by, of course, our own selves, the NativShark platform. As always, go ahead and sign up to learn some Japanese. It's free to get started and a lot of fun. And students are having a lot of success, which is really cool. And we're sharing that this week in the content newsletter that's coming out, aren't we, Nicholas?
We are. I think I should start putting sponsored streamer on my business card or something.
I know, right? You get to feel cool.
I was gonna say my resume, but I don't have a resume because I'm not applying for jobs.
I mean, you have a LinkedIn. You could pop it on there, just in your bio.
Oh yeah, I do have a LinkedIn. I always forget.
I'm a real sponsored streamer because you made a company.
Myself.
Because you made a company that sponsors your own podcast.
I might as well go publish a Kindle book too that has like 10 pages and say I'm a published author also.
Yeah, it's a really good idea.
And I'll make the category something super specific so I can be a bestseller.
Yeah, absolutely. because you'll have 2 sales, and that'll be more than all the other anyone else in your entire
And the
category.
sales will be me and my mom.
Yeah, I won't even buy it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.
It's messed up.
Oh man. Well, this is the 10th time we've done this, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess it does and doesn't feel like it's been 10 times.
Yeah.
I remember we did our first episode, and then after we didn't say it sucked, so we were like, oh, okay, that was all right, I guess. And I said, just imagine how good it'll be after 100 episodes. So
Yeah.
we're 10% of the way there now.
Right. Exactly. We haven't done anything until there's 100 of these.
Yeah,
So
which is 2 years from now. So
that's true. I mean, well, that kind of makes sense. In general, things take longer than I anticipated. So now I'm beginning to anticipate things taking a long time, and it feels good.
yeah, well, I mean, long time is still
A short time.
relative to what someone else thinks is a long time.
That's exactly right. And
Are you specifically talking about our stats? Because I saw your Twitter post of our stats,
kind of,
which do seem really great, except for I know that for us, it seems like a long time. Like
yeah,
it seems slow to us, even though it's kind of insane what that post says.
yeah. I mean, yeah, all right. So the posts that's our business stats for January. And I did their like January review, and I posted on Twitter. Go follow me, Caleb Anderson. And so in January we saw 12% revenue growth from the previous month, which in the previous month we had seen 10% from the previous month before that. So we grew 12% and beat our previous growth by 2%. Our total annual recurring revenue hit 130,000 ARR, and then since that we're at 133,000. So the trending up wasn't even a joke. We are trending up. We have 6.5% churn, and that's been trending down, which is great. Our quick ratio is 2.63, which is essentially adding the growth, a number of like new and activated, and then dividing it by the uh, difference between the churned and downgraded, and then you get like a health ratio. And anything above 2.1 is healthy. So we're 2.63, which is good.
I'm glad you explained that because I was planning to just pretend I knew what it was.
So it's those SaaS metrics, man. Not everyone knows quite what they are. 17,902 total students on February 1st, but now it's February
It's
3rd.
over 18,000.
Yep.
18,000, yeah.
It's 18,112. At least it was like a bit ago. The study hours were 75,241, but now it's I think 77,000. And then 168,095 units. I actually don't know that number off the top of my head. And then this longest study streak was 172 days, and now it's 174 because those people still aren't breaking streaks.
Yeah, which is amazing to me.
So these stats, man, these are in 7 months since we launched. This is what we've seen.
6?
6 months since we launched. Well, 6.5.
6 in 2 weeks from now. No, because like.
Are you serious? Do I not know how to do math?
Yeah.
August to September,
Yeah.
October,
It's
November,
been 5.5 months.
November, December. Oh my God. Wow. So I was 2 months off. So we're only 5.5 months into this?
Yeah. Did you see Kuo's post in Learning Progress today?
No, I haven't checked learning progress today.
Okay, so 174 of 174 days active, 18 days and 8 hours spent studying, 2 hour 31 minutes per day average, and his streak is 174. He has like the absolute perfect stats.
Oh my God. This
Right?
man.
I responded just saying you're making the rest of us look bad.
Wait. He's actually God tier.
Right?
Like literally has the perfect stats. Wow. Massive congrats on that, by the way, sir. Good work.
Yeah.
I hope you listen to this so you can hear us congratulate you. We're very proud.
Yeah, so 18 days, it's like 432 hours plus the 8 hours. So 440 hours of studying that he's done.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's never me, by the way, and will never be me. I cannot study like that. So you're incredible. But I don't want to make those who don't study like that to feel bad either, because progress is progress regardless, and to each person their ability, and that's what matters. And it's really cool to see an amazing example of that. But honestly, I'm inspired by everyone who sticks with it, because that in of itself is the greatest feat.
Well, yeah, I think the whole reason that we mention it is because we feel like we would never get stats like that.
Yeah, I know exactly. That's the whole thing. Like, I couldn't do it. That's crazy. Yeah, Josh in chat on Twitch chat says, "Yeah, I feel bad after hearing that. Thank you, Streak Saver."
Right? I think
Yeah, that's.
we all feel bad after hearing that, Josh.
I know. It's so. I mean, it's both like feel bad, but also kind of inspired at the same time. It's
yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So yeah, I mean, hey, for I guess 5.5 months, doing all right, making it work. But just always looking at how do we optimize going forward. Yes, that's right. Yeah, get back to the thought.
Because when we first talked about NativShark publicly to anyone, we thought 5 months was a lifetime. Like, we're gonna have thousands of units out in 5 months.
Yeah, man, we were wrong.
And yeah, well, we were wrong about what a unit was in the first place, so
that's true.
Part of it. But yeah, things do take longer. Although I think we're getting to a point where like things are going to start happening relatively quickly, at least from a student's perspective, because we're getting all these workflows set up for content. So yeah,
I mean, the problem is that the first year is always a struggle, and that the first year is always a struggle, but you don't know that the first year is always a struggle until you go and live that first year.
Yeah.
So assumptions are wrong in the first year, and I think they just always will be. So you should, like, going forward, I will now always operate under the assumption that my assumptions are wrong, whatever that means.
I remember one time in a podcast, I heard some entrepreneur guy say that people tend to overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 5 years.
Yes.
And I have no idea if that's true, but it has turned out to be true a few times so far.
Right. Well, not only with like NativShark in this past year, but also like when we did Nihongo Shark together, same thing. It's like on a year it felt like we didn't do that much, but then looking at what we did over 5 years, it's like, oh my god, we actually did a lot with that. So I think that's probably a pretty good I don't know, whatever, how you like, sane, I can't think of what those things are called. Whatever, sane, it sounds good. Opinion, thought,
yes, yeah,
estimate sounds good. But okay, on this idea of things taking longer and growth and learning, I significantly appreciate the perspective we have now in February this year versus this time last year. Last year we had just come off of our announcement launch where we did the pre-sale on Lifetime, and we just finished that, and we had sold 1,234 Lifetime subscriptions in about 10 days, and that was wild. Also, hey, future Jesse is now following. Thank you. Welcome to stream and the podcast, and thanks for joining us. So yeah, okay. Anyway, so this time last year we had just gotten off of doing 1,234 Lifetime sales in like 10 days. Okay, we were not prepared for that. And to the extent of which we were not prepared for that, we would not come to know for about a year. or maybe 10 months. I think
You learn little by little
I
over
think
the years.
November to December is when we started really understanding the extent to which we were not prepared for the success that we had at the beginning of last year. Um, so that success was both fantastic and also had some drawbacks to it. It did allow us to get the platform out in kind of what turned out to be record time of 8 months, even though initially we thought it'd be faster than that. But 8 months was, looking back on it, is incredibly fast to get out what we got out at the level of quality that we got it out. And that lifetime sale is kind of what allowed us to do that. The negative to that is that we postponed having to really understand what our business was and how to actually run it more sustainably, which is kind of takes us to where we are now with these stats that we have. And now we have, hard stats and monthly data that we can compare, past progress versus current progress and project a little bit into the future. And we can analyze like what moves do we have to make to get to where we want to go, and what are the actual numbers? What are the actual, like, what is realistic, right? Which is something I want to talk about just in general as our kind of like a theme for this episode, because last episode we did a lot of dreaming, which was fun. We talked a lot about like our ambitions and what we want NativShark to be and all this kind of cool stuff, and it was great. But this time, especially, I just wrote the newsletter this morning, and I was thinking about January and kind of like, how do we talk about and message where we are now as a company and what we're doing? And the word that came to me was focus. And January was all about like attenuating our focus as a company and being realistic. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we are today, and kind of what I wanted to talk about today. It's being realistic but like in a good way, and that's it's exciting at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the word realistic is hard to use because
Yeah,
sometimes it means pessimistic.
that's what right. Thank you. Yeah,
Right?
elaborate on that, because I don't mean pessimism when I'm saying that. I mean it in a really good
Yeah.
way. So yeah, if you could elaborate on that.
Well, we're not. Well, you could say, yeah, we're focusing on what's realistic, or you could say we're focusing on what's feasible. But realistic sounds kind of pessimistic, and feasible sounds kind of idealistic, because I think many of my fellow students know what it's like to think about what's feasible. I start studying a language and I think, oh, it's feasible that I'm going to study 3 hours a day for the first month, and I'm going to have 60 hours of learning down, and then I'm going to know all this stuff, and I'm going to study like that every day for a year and be a master of the thing. Feasible. But
I think the word we actually want to
realistic.
the word we want to use is sustainable.
Yeah, sustainable.
I think what we're focusing on is being like the better way to. I mean, realistic is an okay word, but there's connotations with it, and then same thing with feasibility. But sustainable, that's the real path forward.
Yeah, we're putting the pace slider onto the business.
Exactly. Yeah, man, it's coming full circle. Which
right.
What that means is we're looking at things in terms of like 12, 24, 36 months, right? Like these are more sustainable timelines as a business to be thinking about. And that's interesting because I think we didn't know the type of business we were making before, and it takes a while for that to figure out. And I still don't think we entirely know, but I think we're getting a clear picture. And that is, it's like we want to build a calm, profitable, sustainable company that builds something amazing for our community that we know, right? It's like much easier to build a product for people that you know, and that's what we have, and it's amazing, really. And
yeah,
really trying to understand that and put it into context and like take I don't know, full advantage of the opportunity and the I don't know, the goodness that we have with, like, let's do it, you know what I mean? And it's a longer timeline instead of being swayed by, hype in the news, essentially, and what you look up online when you search startup.
Yeah.
It's a damaging, I think, a damaging, like, I don't know, rhetoric that exists out there. And I want more companies to cut through the noise. And there's some good examples of this, like Basecamp or Calendly or Canny. There are companies that exist that are doing this bootstrapped sustainable model, wherein they grow sustainably over time, and they take very low amounts of investment, if any, and only what's needed to get to the next threshold until the company is fully in swing. And that takes between 3 to 10 years for all these companies.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We're not even 1/3 through.
I know there's probably like someone listening thinking, what? I'm going to have to wait 3 to 10 years for all 4 phases? And no, that's not what we're talking about.
That's
we're
different.
Talking about NativShark, the company, not learning Japanese, the product, which is what we're doing right now. And even on that note, like talking about what's feasible versus what's sustainable and what's doable, we get a lot of questions asking like, when are the 4 phases coming out?
Yeah.
And it's such a loaded question because first, like, you probably don't, even if they were all out tomorrow, I think most people would not make it to phase 3 by the end of this year.
Say that again. I missed.
I think even if we had all 4 phases released tomorrow,
Yeah.
I had like a magic release 4 phases button,
Right.
I think most students would not make it to phase 3 before the end of this year.
Yeah.
They would not finish phase 2 before the end of this year.
That's right. I would imagine anyway.
If you did, so someone actually asked, like, when?
Right, we had a question.
How are you going to divide up the number of units in phases 2, 3, 4? Because phase 1 has 166 units, and just so you know, our goal with the 4 phases is that doing 1 unit a day would take 4 years, which means 1,460 units. So you can say roughly we've done 160, which means that we have 1,200 left. If I can, 1,300 left. I can't do math.
Yeah.
So phase 2 is probably going to be about double the length of phase 1. I would guess roughly 300, in the 300 to 400 units range. I think phase 3 will probably be 600 plus units. And then the rest will be phase 4, which should be somewhere between 300 to 500 units. It really depends on how things turn out as we make them. And sometimes I wish we didn't even say we had 4 phases, because everyone compares that in their mind to like what you would normally learn to learn Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
yes,
you do the onboarding for some of these Japanese learning things, and it's like, what level are you? And it's intermediate or advanced says something like 250 kanji or something.
I know.
It's like,
and phase 1 teaches 763.
Well, you finish kanji in phase 2.
Yeah, they're done with the Joyo kanji.
Done.
We should specify.
So the general use kanji. Like, we're gonna keep teaching them as we go, especially for names and places and things.
Yeah.
But like the kanji you have to learn are gonna be done in phase 2, for example. Which most people who graduate with a degree in Japanese don't even learn them all.
Right.
Very well, at least the people that I've met. Like, I'm sure some of them do, but I bet they studied quite a bit on their own to do it, and not just completed their course catalog or whatever.
Yeah, I know that we need to work on our messaging and our onboarding, because we get questions. We get like questions or statements in our email like, "Hi, can I?" And I understand why these people are asking this question, so I don't like. They're fine for asking it. It's nothing wrong with them. It's our fault.
No, it's our fault.
Yeah.
That, like,
so they'll ask things like, "Hi, I can I skip phase 1? I already know kana and some vocabulary and like basic particles. which is a fair question, right? Compared to most language apps out there, that's what you get in like what you would think of as a phase one. It's like you can learn and read kana, and you kind of know what like a particle is, and you got some vocabulary. Like that's the extent. So I understand the question, and that's why it's like, oh my god, really need to work on this, which we've talked about in the past how we are working on that. But yeah, you learn so much more than that in phase one. Um, in fact, phase one, I mean, really covers as it is more than any language app. I
Yeah,
think.
I mean, it depends what
It
you think is
depends.
being covered. Like because some other
Yeah.
like you look at like something like Bazoo or something, it looks like they have a lot of lessons, and then
Yeah.
you dive into the intermediate ones or whatever,
Right.
and I'm not gonna say anything else about
There might be
it.
some stuff
um,
that we're missing from like the full path that they have, but that'll be quickly covered in phase two if we are missing any
well,
of
yeah,
it.
and there's well, we get to the question of what should be covered
That's a really good point too.
also,
Yeah.
because you get in. I don't know any app that goes to like intermediate, and then their intermediate just becomes a smattering of JLPT grammar points,
Yeah, that's right.
and
It's like a mismatch.
so you end up learning just this big chunk of textbook Japanese, and then you come to Japan maybe, or you watch a show, and it's not how people are talking.
Mm. Yeah.
So anyway, I don't want to get into that, but I'll say that back to talking about what's feasible versus what's sustainable. And I think that the question is not when are the four phases going to get done? The question is when are units going to be released faster than I can learn them
Mm.
at my appropriate level?
Right.
So I think most people calling themselves intermediate students probably would fall somewhere in the phase one to phase two range. Advanced students probably somewhere in phase two, three. And then even then there's so many gaps that are going to show up. Like the further you go, the more gaps there will be. I passed
Right.
JLPT N2, for example, in 2012,
11.
December of
Oh.
2012. And I, I, yeah, there would have been a lot of gaps. There would have been so many things in phase one I didn't know,
Hmm.
let alone phase two, three, four. Um, and so yeah, do have this problem of communicating like what is a level of fluency, and I think it's going to be difficult to communicate that properly until we do have the four phases out. But at least once we have more of phase two out and units are coming out at a solid pace, if we could have onboarding where people can see what level they
Yeah,
are,
that's what I was gonna say.
I
I
think people will be like, "Oh, okay, this is my level, and this content is coming out
I think
consistently,
that's the most
and we're good
important.
to go."
Yeah, I think that's the most important part is the actual path needs to be more flexible relative to um, the student. Meaning, if you're new to Japanese, starting at the beginning of NativShark is absolutely perfect, and you don't need to worry it literally at all. You just keep going,
Lucky.
right? Amazing. Which is like a couple of our students that were in that video as well. Like they started with NativShark, and you can see how much progress they've made in like around 5 months. It's insane. Way better than me for sure. And I was going pretty
I don't
fast.
even want to talk about what I was doing
You're
before.
yeah you were a sad story. You had nothing back then. At least I had HJS, the original. Anyway,
Hey, I knew Genki one like the back of my hand at least.
right. My point is when there. So the first So solving this messaging problem. There's like three parts to it. The first part is us getting more media and more better logged out pages so people can understand more. That's one like top of funnel solution. So the intrigue is there and it's easier to understand without even getting started what it is. The second is getting all like at least phase two content out, but I eventually all four phases. And then the third and the real what I think is the real solution is a very pristine onboarding experience that can understand like what resource you've come from, or you can take a bit of like a placement test itself if you're not sure, and then it will essentially redraw the path to be unique to you until you're like on path with the standard NativShark. Like so you might start from like a random spattering of things that you knew, but our goal is going to be to get you onto like the NativShark path, and that might take a little bit for some people, or it might, some people who have like a lot of vast random knowledge, it might take, you know, a while of using the platform before it fully gets you onto the straight up path. But yeah, I think that's the ultimate solution. And once we can do that, we pretty much got it. Because like if I could just join NativShark and say I've done Genki 1 and Genki 2 and I just like check the boxes, and then like my whole thing is adjusted for me because we know what Genki 1, Genki 2 teach, and since we teach more than that, it's just like, all right, done, go. That'd be incredible. Like, so that's I think like one of like the final solution. And then by the time we get there, we'll find other problems. But from today's perspective, those are the three main steps to solving the messaging problem and showing that you really can learn all that you need to learn, and NativShark is the best way to learn Japanese, hands down.
Yeah. I see Josh's question. Are you still thinking of changing the original travel lessons at the beginning of phase 1? Yeah, but I don't know that they'll be changed until we have units coming out consistently at a pretty fast pace for phase 2 and beyond. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that if we had the level check thing that Caleb just described it's less of an issue.
Right.
If we had better messaging, it's less of an issue. But yeah, we're going to redo some of phase 1 at some point.
Right.
And when we do redo it, you're probably going to learn, like, you'll probably learn kanji in unit 1, for example.
Yeah.
Because you have to if you want to do perfect +1 iteration. Like if you always want to only learn one new thing at a time, you have to learn kanji in unit 1 or 2, but 1 is better.
Yeah, and it's super doable, and the outline for that is really cool. The matter of implementing it though is, we want to see consistent units coming out for phase, because that's like the bigger issue right now. Like, yes, the beginning of phase 1 can be improved, and it should and will be, but it works decently well. And what's not working,
especially if it works pretty well if you don't know kana.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Otherwise, it seems like what are these travel lessons about?
And the part that is more of an issue right now, of course, is the fact that there's not consistent units, and that's why that's our focus, of course. But on that note of like the travel lessons in the beginning, honestly though, with the way that we're going to rework the progression system so that you can onboard to any point, and based on previous knowledge, that it would also allow you to say like, I want to travel in Japan like next month, and I'm starting from the beginning, and it could drag those travel lessons back to the front for you if it wanted to, and then the thing could continue from there. Because there are people who really enjoy and prefer that it's travel oriented in the beginning, or for people who either live in Japan or travel in Japan and they don't know a lot of Japanese, that's actually ideal for them. So we don't want to completely remove that functionality from it either. Instead, it's more making it more adaptable. And sometime we should have Jacob on here, and we can talk about the tech of how that's possible, and like how we're doing it from a code perspective, because that'd be fun to talk about. But today, what's happening at the company is we are getting those content to be coming out. So I'm gonna look at chat for a second. And let's see. I see from Peter. He says, cheers, looking forward to the podcast. Welcome, Peter. Thanks for joining. He also mentioned when we were talking about like timelining and goals and sustainability, he said at our company we do 10-year, 3-year, 1 year, then 90-day goals. The 90-day goals build towards the 1 year, the 1 towards the 3, and the 3 towards the 10, but you start with the big vision. I think that's a pretty good perspective. I don't think that we're at a stage where we can really feasibly know enough about 10 years, but 5 years is something that we started to think in terms of. I would say since around December, when we kind of, everything for us has been kind of shifting towards sustainability. We are now kind of doing that, where we have a strategy meeting on thinking about, okay, 5 years, and then like 3, 2, 1, 6 months, this month. So it's similar to that, but at the moment that's kind of where we're feeling that we're at. And I think since we started thinking with that perspective, things have been a lot better. I think you would agree, sir.
Yeah,
I
I
would
do
hope.
agree. Yeah, 10 years is like impossible for us to guess well, I think.
Yeah. And that's mostly due to the nature of the business type that we're in, like being a software application. It's like I can pretend to think about what would be cool in 10 years, but the entire space that we're in is evolving so rapidly because that's what technology does, that it's hard to say for sure. So that's why it's kind of like I can dream at 10 years, but 5 years I think
Yeah.
I can figure a bit more about.
Even just trying to guess what, online education products will be like in 10 years is very difficult
Right, because
because
yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're not going to be a bunch of video lectures, which is what we have now,
Right.
because we've had that since like 2012. And yeah.
Yeah, Peter says the 10 is definitely a guess, but gets you excited. The 5 year is essential, equally effective. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, that's cool. Let's see. Eze from YouTube was asking, "Can you play the harp?" You got this question last time too, I think. But
No,
we,
this
yeah,
Ray, my wife, and
yeah,
our content architect, she is practicing to learn the harp. We just rent this.
yeah,
Um, and in her precious little free time, she practices, and she's pretty good at it, even though she only has been practicing for a couple months because she's really good at piano, so it's not that different.
yeah. She's just good at music in general, I think.
Yeah.
Cell Talks just finished a meeting, so I can sneak in for a little. Hi guys, welcome.
Hey, what's up?
Thanks for sneaking in on your meeting. Come to hang out with us. Talk about
After
business
this
and
meeting.
after. Sorry, yes. Talk about business and um, education and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
And since we were just talking about the for all the content stuff, like I should just get the other question from Josh answered, which is how are you going to make sure that content follows the style and quality of your Japanese teaching? Uh, yeah, it's pretty hard to do that, but I think the main way that we're managing to start doing this is by breaking things down into smaller pieces and then establishing clear standards for what those pieces should be.
yep.
Um, Last week, I wrote a few lessons for some of the new Phase 2 units, for example, and it was almost no work for me because our content architect had decided what Japanese was being taught, and she had we had voice actors record the audio, and she had checked it and made sure it was natural, and I was left notes like of things to mention in the lesson, and the sentences were translated by a native Japanese speaker and then edited by a non-native speaker of Japanese, like a native speaker of English, to make sure that translations were accurate.
Hmm.
And because we have context for all the sentences now, it was like there's not a whole lot to explain about like what situation would you use this sentence in, because that information was just sitting there for me when I went to write the lesson. So it was literally just sort of filling in the little gaps above and below it.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you break down the content a lot. There are still a few things that need to be figured out for Japanese, even like before we even talk about stuff that's not Japanese teaching. Like we still need to improve a few things regarding our standards for teaching Japanese. Um, but yeah, breaking things down and then trying to have someone else do the little thing. And then if they don't do it the way you were hoping they were, then getting them to do it correctly without directly editing what they've done,
Hmm.
sort of what we do. So, for example, if I see a translation that I don't think meets our standards, maybe it's a little too literal, it doesn't sound natural enough in English or something like that. It would take me 2 seconds to just fix the translation and be like, you should have written this instead of that.
Hmm.
But I'm not allowed to do that. I have to go back to the instructions for translators. And if it doesn't exist, I have to create the piece of the instructions that explains why that type of translation would have been not preferable. And then I could just link them, be like, hey, go back and check this part of the instructions,
Right.
and then redo your translations. And then if the translation gets fixed after they go read the instructions again, we know the instructions are working. And if the translation isn't fixed, we got to improve the instructions more. And so just little pieces of things like that explained well. And then it just builds up to the entire thing after a while.
Right. And that's like that. Okay, so that's the process of how the steps we're taking to ensure that we can reliably and consistently create quality content. But to generally answer the question from like a general sense of how are we gonna ensure that the content follows the style and quality, is that, well, we're gonna do what Nico said and understand and build that process for Japanese first. Like, we're gonna finish Japanese. I mean, I don't know. That's such a hard thing to say. Like, finish. What does that even mean? But we'll get to a satisfactory point of which all parties involved can agree this is quite satisfactory, before we really do try another language. And I don't think we've made that necessarily clear enough in the past, because I don't think we've even known that in the past. But the thing is what we do is teach Japanese, and we do it really well, and we've built a really good platform for it, and we need to finish that and see that through with Japanese before we then go to another language, because then we will have a very solid base to stand upon. We'll be standing upon the shoulders of our past work that says we can do this, and then we can look into the future horizons of other languages. And here's another like thing that I've been thinking about, and it kind of addresses to another question that we got, or not, maybe a question, but yeah, it's a question from Sebastian in email. He was asking, how do you think about the trap of optimizing for beginners? Most of your revenue will come from new users who are mostly beginners. From a business perspective, it makes sense to launch as many languages as possible instead of getting one language to the same content depth as, say, Nihongo Shark was before. And I actually, like, that's a really good question, because I probably used to think that way before as well. That that's that like we needed to just get like a base version of it out for Japanese. Now we can go to other languages, and then we can grow the business that way. But like, that just follows a pattern that we've seen before. We've seen Duolingo do that, and we've seen like Rosetta Stone do that, and we've seen Lingodeer do that, and Busuu does that, and Babbel does that, and like any other language online education platform that I've seen has done that, where they get a base not version of one language, and then they go hyper growth and scale it to as many languages as possible and as quickly as possible. And they often end up just copying and pasting to the new language their previous language. Like, even in the case of Duolingo, I don't know if they still do this, but initially they would just take the same word lists and translate them, which is completely wrong. And we always said we're not going to do that. But by just trying to rush into another language, we're essentially just doing a slightly improved version of that, but still not really fixing the problem, which is do one thing really well, learn all about that thing, and then move on to the next thing, which I think is the real strategy and the kind of company that we've always wanted to be. It just took us a while to understand that.
Yeah. Well, for me, as a person who just loves studying languages, I don't want to start studying something that's going to run out.
Yes.
And like, I hate to say that because like we don't have the rest of the phases released yet. That's why I'm obsessing over it all the time.
Yeah.
Because NativShark is supposed to make learning simple, which means you just show up and you just press study now and just do whatever, and interact with whatever it puts in front of you. And that should be all you have to do to get to pretty much any level you want to get to. So I don't think it makes learning simple if we don't have content that goes to a depth that is
Right.
much deeper than others.
Yeah, it gets complicated again after that if we don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the content's going to end, what's the point of even starting to study it? I'll just end up resource jumping, and all the resources are going to be the beginner content. And it's so hard to find good intermediate and advanced content that you just start thinking, what's the point of even trying to do this in the first place? At least that's
Yeah.
that's sort of what goes on in my head when I think about it.
Right. And I definitely think that you're not the only one who feels that way. So I'm really excited to be able to say without a doubt that we offer the most content you can possibly find in one place for learning Japanese. And we're not quite there yet. We're getting closer every day. But when that day comes, I will be happy. Maybe I'll eat a cupcake.
Yeah. Also, like, I'd love, on a personal note, I would just love to be able to maintain and improve my Japanese level by just doing NativShark.
Yeah.
So I'd love some of the higher phase content to get released for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, going back to the thing of like why we're doing Japanese first is we're not going to switch to a different product until I'm basically doing nothing for Japanese. I just go and look at a unit and I'm like, well, it's better than I would have written it and it's perfect. And that happens pretty much every time. It's like, okay, let's go think about what other products we can make because
This
this is
is yeah.
already
This is working.
stable and it's being released consistently and they don't need me.
Yeah.
And then I can study it instead, which will be cool.
Right. The other day Chie was asking me, kind of like, I wonder when, phase 3 will be out so that you can study Japanese again. She's like, when are you going to get better at the language? But she knows that I won't study unless it's with NativShark. So when's that phase 3 coming out? Nico, let me be one of our students. I am one of our students, right? And so are you. Like, it's a thing. Like, I feel it. Again, we're building for the community and we're part of that community as well. So I feel the desire to want to have it out, to have that content out, right? It's like, it's really exciting. So recently I was this morning I was, after the newsletter, I was working on some of the NativShark like memo or pitch memo for like the round that we're working on, which we could talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, I was filling out an angel list, building an angel list profile for our company, and it was like, you give your high level pitch, and then describe your product. And so the high level pitch, I was like, make learning simple, and then like describe the product. It was like it gave me like a character limit, and it was really short, which is great. So I thought about this, and this is what I've got. So I'm going to run this past you, Nico, and then you can let me know. We're going to workshop this for a second. Okay. All right. So I got NativShark is a comprehensive language learning platform, Japanese only for now. It takes all the burden out of worrying about when to study, what to study, and how to study. All you need to do is set your desired acquisition pace, show up, and press study now. We handle the rest.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Any critiques? Or do I get a pass?
I think you get a pass.
I'm glad.
Obviously, there's more we could say, but I think that is a nice introduction to what we do.
I'll paste it into our chat at the bottom too, just so you can see it written out. But yeah, I mean, it's taken a really long. Like, it's funny. Something so short has taken me like a year to figure out how to say. If you asked me to write that a year ago, even like 6 months ago, I couldn't have done that. It's like the longer you work on something, the more concise you can be about it. Probably because you understand that thing better.
Yeah, it's like if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it well enough.
Yeah.
That's what they always say, right? I think that gets attributed to Einstein, but who knows? Everything gets attributed to Einstein.
That's so funny. It does. You're so right.
Yeah. There's lots of fake quotes by Einstein. Yeah, if you ever have a clever saying, just pretend that it's from Einstein. No one's gonna call you out.
They'll be like, "Huh, that's right." So,
yeah. NativShark is the best. Einstein quote. That's what he said.
That's right. Circa.
He looked into the future and saw us.
Yeah, circa 1933. So Tai says, I also want a non-path content to teach me all this old Japanese I'm seeing in Sekiro Wara. And then Celtox
Yeah.
said, people learning Japanese are often interested in other Japan-related things such as culture, geography, history, etc. Would these sort of things be bundled as extra content or possibly a whole Japanese history course / path down the line? The first one, I think. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. So I think what Ty is describing is probably phase 4 plus, like in old Japanese,
Yeah.
the type of thing that a native speaker needs to study to know well. So yeah. And then I think stuff about culture and geography, history probably is just extra credit content that you can sort of study on your own, but that doesn't mean there won't be paths. And I think one of the things we'll have to do is figure out how we want that to look. Like when is it a path and when is it just a mess of extra credit things that you could do?
Mm,
And maybe we let students create extra credit paths based on our library of content even.
right. So people can, like, we'll make the content and tag it and all these things, but people can potentially build their own and then share them with people to be like, I think this is the best way to connect these things. This is what I did, kind of a thing. Provide like a library.
Yeah, because we get into this really interesting problem with phase 4 plus where because there's an infinite number of potential paths, you'll get to the point where one of those paths it'll contain redundant content because you've done another phase 4 plus path already.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So if you've already like done like chemistry, for example, like learning about chemistry in Japanese, and that's different than learning about like biochemistry or something.
Mm.
So obviously there's going to be overlap, so you don't want to learn the same, but you still want to only learn one piece of new content at a time, otherwise you're going to feel kind of overwhelmed. Maybe less overwhelmed when you're at that level because you can pretty much deal with unknown language pretty comfortably once you get to a certain level in Japanese.
Mm.
um, but it's a problem that I think we're going to have to figure out as we go.
When the time comes.
I will Yeah, I will say that we want to build out our library of non-path content this year, like quite a bit. And we are working on setting up the workflows to make that possible right now.
Mm. Yeah. On that note of kind of what we do and simplifying the messaging around it, I got a pretty interesting email from Peter, and he said something that was pretty cool because said he had been thinking about it as well, and he said maybe the simplest way I can summarize it is that you are building a system around how the brain learns, not what it is learning. If you understand the how, you can teach any number of what's. Just some musing I was having, and I kind of like that. Like that is more or less the meta around what it is that we're trying to do and make. I like that that picture of saying we are working on a system around how we learn rather than
Yeah,
necessarily what.
this question of how people learn, it's tricky because the most effective way to learn might not be the way that most people will actually learn.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like you have a lot of like at MIT they have I forget what it's called, but they have some kind of like education research facility, and often they'll talk about what they call the 4 Ps, which is projects, peers, passion, play. So they say like when you have those 4 Ps together, people learn really well. Like if you have some kids that are passionate about, you know, skateboarding or something,
Mm-hmm.
then they do it with their peers, and their project is a specific thing they want to do, like learn a new trick that they saw on a video, and they have a good time learning it. Like they're going to learn it really well. and they've found that this expands into other things. So like I say that, and the next thing to think is, well, that doesn't sound like NativShark at all. I mean, yeah, if you're passionate about it, that's probably why you're studying this path. Like if someone is studying Japanese now, I would guess that there's a passion related to Japanese, and that's why. The peers would be like our community if you wanted it. But it's like, what's the play? What's the projects? And I think we could implement those things also, but I think we need to be really careful not to make it a hassle to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love learning languages, and I agree that a project is probably the most effective way for me to do something. Like if I wanted to have a conversation with my step brother-in-law, I don't know, my wife's half sister's husband, right? If I wanted to have a conversation with him in Korean about his job or something,
Yeah.
that's a project. I could sit down with a teacher and I could tell her like what he does, how many kids he has, where he lives, and we could come up with lots of things that I could talk to him about, and it's relevant to me,
Yeah.
and it would be really, really effective for me to study that. But it's such a hassle to sit down with a teacher and to come up with the sentences I want to know, to have the foundation to
Right.
understand those sentences, to get some audio that I could review the sentences and like have time to practice them. Maybe it's more effective, but it's such a hassle that I'm not going to do it. So I think we do need to think a lot about how the brain works, but we also need to think about what are people actually going to do.
Right. We have to remove barriers, and we have to create an optimal path. Maybe not the best case, right? But we're working for the optimal case, right? Which is optimization. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, well, it goes back to what's feasible, what's realistic, and what's
It's just
idealistic.
yeah, and then what's
Because like the 14th
sustainable,
thing that talks about is an idealistic vision of how people learn things,
right?
but it's not realistic for a lot of people. Like if you only have 30 minutes a day to learn, like uh, I don't know if you're gonna have the energy to put together a project with your peers
Right.
and all that stuff when you could just show up and just click a button instead and more or less get what you want.
But we can also draw inspiration from the idealistic vision. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, I'm obsessed. We're
Exactly.
always going to.
So I think there's always a place, and it always matters to know what the idealistic version is, such that you know what could be in order to build what is. You know,
Yeah,
and removing the barriers of entry and removing mental load and mental hassle, creating a streamlined path, and then providing ways in which students can engage in some of the other more idealistic facets of learning, I think is nearing the optimal case for
yeah,
like actual, globally distributed self-paced learning.
yeah. I can't tell you how often I've come up with an amazing study plan for myself that's relevant to my life and everything else. And it would be so effective if I did it. And it just ends up being such a hassle to do it that I don't do it.
Yeah, no, I've done it too. You got to do the one that you will do. Like when we talk to our students, it's like the the best way to study is the one that you can do, and the most effective method is the one that you can commit to. And showing up every single day is better than like binging on some days and doing nothing on other days. It's like it's all part of that same philosophy, you know, of taking steps, progressing, long
Yeah.
term view. Take a long position on your life, and just hold.
Yeah. It's confusing. Like, I think this just goes back to why we wanted our mission statement to be make learning simple, is because it's really easy to get lost if you start thinking about what's effective to do and what's not. For
Yeah.
example, if I want to learn Spanish or French, then you go look at blogs and stuff. And for a romance language like that, as an English speaker, you're going to come across a lot of polylingual language experts that are going to tell you speak a lot all the time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
go do face-to-face lessons and talk to people a lot. Because if you actually do that with like Spanish or something, you can get quite good,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not that different than English, really. And you learn to make sentences that are relevant to you and all these other things. Um, I have anxiety, like even taking a single lesson. So am I really going to take 700 of them?
Yeah.
And I mean, aside from the fact that that'd be an insane amount of money to do. And then if you don't have the money, you end up doing language exchange. So now it's not just, it's like double the time to do it, because you have to actually do the English back to them after. And so I see like a linguist saying something like that, and I just think, well, yeah, but I don't want to take a bunch of lessons, because it's just going to
Right.
stress me out. I'm not going to be consistent, and my schedule's not going to allow for it. And so I'm going to forget the stuff that I learned. I'm not going to keep making progress. And then I'm going to feel like I'm not making progress and quit.
Right. The thing is like it's not that there are not effective ways to learn languages right now. There's a many effective ways to learn languages. The problem is that not enough people can realistically do them due to the barriers surrounding those methods. Not that they're not good, they are, but what we're trying to do is, again, create an optimal case where the most amount of people can reach the highest level of success. And that's what's not really been done before. And that's like our unique um, advantage, I guess, if we're talking business terms, our
Yeah.
competitive
I saw this
advantage.
I saw this video one time by this guy who was like really good at Chinese, talking about how to learn a language. And the takeaway was like, you got to put yourself in an environment where you're forced to use the language. And when you say things incorrectly, they say the same thing back to you correctly, the same way that we do with children. That's how they learn to phrase things correctly. Um, and I was thinking, oh, yeah, that'd be awesome. But I don't live in China, and
Yeah.
I have a job and a family. And how in the world am I going to do that?
Right. So then the response of someone hearing that is typically, well, I guess I'm not going to be able to learn Chinese. You're not going to be able to learn Mandarin.
Yeah.
Instead of like, okay, let's find a way to create a system that someone like yourself can build into their life. Right. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Um,
Learning Chinese would be fun. Side note.
excuse me, my throat. Yeah, there was someone who came into the community yesterday. They did their self intro in like Chinese, and then they did it in English, and then they did it in Japanese, and that was really cool. And I said, "Hey, welcome. It's always fun to have multilingual people around." I believe they were, I believe they were Chinese American. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to go back and read the intro. Um, but yeah, they were learning Japanese, and they were excited to be there, and I was excited to have them. So join our community, nativeshark.com/community. There's lots of cool stuff happening over there. Okay, so this is another question which comes from the community in Discord, and it was from Cell Talks, and he said, I can't remember if it's been addressed in a podcast already, but would you be able to address how you have personally handled times of low motivation, or what your recommendations for that might be? As in how best to continue your studies when your motivation is low, just maintaining so you don't give up on it versus forcing and pushing to make progress, etc. What do you do?
Oh, you want me to answer?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
me.
yeah. That's how
Okay.
you answer it.
Uh, I did shadow loops, first of all. And the reason I do them is not to study. It's because I have a really hard time paying attention to audio content in the first place. I always just drift in and out mentally because I can't stay focused on it. So I go for a walk and listen to shadow loops. And yeah, I learned some of the language, but more so, I just start daydreaming about my new life once I know the language, because I hear it and I can't help but just start daydreaming about how cool it's gonna be once I know all this stuff,
Yeah.
and it just gets exciting. The thing I've done in the past also is just I do my reviews, even if doing my reviews just means hitting smiley face, like spamming smiley face, and not even really
Paying attention.
knowing what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that works unless you also do something that excites you about the language.
Right.
Because I did that for like a Spanish deck I had, a flashcard deck I had for Spanish and for Portuguese back in the day. So the Portuguese deck had like 1,000 cards. The Spanish one had uh, like 4,000 or something. These are all completed cards. None of them are new. So it's just I would do the reviews, take like 5-10 minutes to do all of those reviews for both languages,
Yeah.
and it did not make me motivated to study more at all.
Mm-hmm.
So after a few years, I was like, well, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. All the cards ended up being super mature anyway, because
Yeah,
I was just
exactly.
doing reviews for like 2-3 years. And then,
Yeah.
I guess to the point I was like 3 flashcards due a day. And yeah, I was not motivated after that. But the reason I mentioned doing that is because if you keep your review count low and you just keep the stuff in your head a little bit, just a tiny bit, then when the motivation goes back up, you're ready to jump back in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel like you have to catch up, because even if you feel like you have to catch up, you probably don't as much as you think you do. But it sucks to feel like that. So
Yeah. I think
you
that's
know,
great.
I would say getting your reviews done, like just pretend it's like brushing your teeth, because you don't want to not brush your teeth for a month and then come back to brush them. uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, the thing that makes you excited about learning it, which for
Yeah.
me, like for example, the reason I mentioned Shadow Loops for Korean is like I want to talk to my family. So I listen to Shadow Loops because when I do, I start daydreaming about talking to my family in Korean.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for Japanese, for someone out there, it might be going and reading like a manga or a light novel or something, even if you're reading it in English.
Yeah.
Like or watching an anime like in Japanese with English subtitles. Like if that was the reason you started learning Japanese, I bet you're gonna want to learn it when you go watch some more anime.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would do.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I was essentially going to say something similar, and it's just remember and find the things that got you excited in the first place, and do some of those things, and don't stress out. Um, Maintaining that progress. Um, for the case of NativShark, it's doing reviews will keep the progress. If you want to keep the progress streak going, or the maintain streak going, you just have to get through the reviews for the day and just call it there. Maybe listen to some shadow loops, maybe don't. Um, Keep doing that, and actually, I think technically you only have to do 5 review cards in order for it to count. Don't tell anyone that, but I think that's what it is. So after the
Yeah.
first 5, yeah, it should count as the streak, and you can maintain, and yeah, it should keep going after that. And then like Nico said, I would say maybe give yourself a little bit of a break, in that sense where you're just doing like 5 a day, but then yeah, go find the things that got you excited in the first place. That's huge. That's consistently been the only thing that can keep me coming back to something that I feel like I've given up on, or I'm doing minimal progress on, is I'll come back and see the things that I wanted to do, or who I wanted to be, or the thing that got me excited. Um, and then I don't know, it gets me excited again. And then little by little, I bring it back in. And then a month later or something, now it's a part of my life in full force again. And I'm learning new content. And you got through that dip of maybe like 1 to 3 weeks. I have found in my life that a dip, if left untreated, will kill what I'm trying to learn. But if I give myself like about 1 to 3 weeks of time to kind of like take it easy for a bit, that's about like the length of time it takes for me to get re-inspired and then continue on. Um,
Yeah. And then yeah, whatever the thing is. So like I also want to learn Thai really bad. So I don't study Thai right now because we don't have it on Native Shark. But I can tell you the things that make me want to study. It's like if Ray and I talk about, where are we gonna live next time we live in Bangkok?
mm,
We go on Google Maps and like look at the neighborhoods and be like, well, if we lived here, we could live in this apartment building. And then like, look, there's a Starbucks right there. That's cool. And like, oh, they built a new mall right there. Like that's exciting. And then I start imagining like, oh shit, how am I gonna order some food in Thai?
yeah, you're in Thailand. You got to speak Thai. Yeah,
Yeah, and so now I want to learn Thai again. even just talking about it right now.
Yeah.
One thing I don't do, and I don't know if this is a personal thing or if it's applicable to most people, is I don't talk to other people about what I want to learn almost ever. I talk about it on here, like saying I want to learn Korean and Thai just because, like I kind of should be open with like my fellow students about like my motivations to learn languages because we work at NativShark. But I don't actually tell like family and friends really what I'm studying or want to study. And I don't know why, but it makes me less motivated when I do.
Yeah. I I think you you wrote an article about this a long time ago, I think.
Yeah, well, there are
There's
studies that
studies on it
say that
too.
the reason you shouldn't do it is because it triggers the same sense of accomplishment as if you had done the thing. So like you tell a person, "Oh, I'm learning Japanese," and they say, "Oh, good for you. That's so cool. Awesome." And then you feel like, "Oh, this is the great feeling of me having learned Japanese, even though I haven't learned it yet."
Yeah.
And so your brain is like, "All right, we checked that box off. Let's go do the next thing." So instead of having it be this reward that is coming in the future, you already got it.
Mm.
Is what the science says. Um, so maybe that's part of it. I just know that I just feel less excited about it if I've talked about it to other people.
Yeah.
And I think part of might also just be the way that I respond to accountability. It's like if
Mm.
someone asks me, "Have you been doing X?" My initial reaction is like, "Well, I'm not going to do X anymore."
Yeah, because you want me to. Hell no. You can't tell me
You've
that.
been studying Korean every day. It's like I'm not going to study Korean, and I don't know. Like that's just a personal thing, I think. But
Yes. I do not think you're the only one who feels that way. I feel that way in some extent. So for me, it depends on who the person is. So there are certain people in my life that I've identified as being beneficial for me to share what I'm working on with, because they keep me accountable in a way that is good. But I don't like to just tell the open world or even most of my friends and family things that I'm trying to do for the exact same reasons that you mentioned. It doesn't feel good. But to a certain group of people, it is beneficial for me to say what I'm striving for, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
you also need to be, if you are going to tell someone about what you're trying to learn, you should be really careful about who you tell, because without even meaning to, like without thinking that they're doing it, a lot of people will try to discourage you from learning the thing if they think they couldn't do it.
Yeah, unfortunately so.
So, and a lot of people don't mean to do it. They just do it naturally. They don't realize that that the reason they're saying you shouldn't do that or you won't be able to do it anyway is because that's what they think to themselves. I can't tell you how many times I've responded to emails from people who say something like, I told my mom and dad, like, I'm going to learn Japanese. And they were like, "You're not going to learn it. You're just going to quit. Why would you even try?"
Hmm.
And so they're like, if you're trying to stay motivated, like, that's not going to help
Yeah.
very much. And
Yeah.
your friends do it too, especially if they actually want to learn the thing the same way you do and they failed before. It's like even worse.
Yeah, because they'll be like, you can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a reason that if you go in the forums of a lot of different learning spheres, especially learning Japanese, go into a forum somewhere, and there's a lot of negativity. And it's really not, it's sad because I think a source of a lot of that negativity is that people wanted to learn it and then they didn't. And then they want to believe that it's too hard to learn or that all these other methods are bad because they don't want to believe that it's their fault that they didn't learn it,
Right.
when it's actually more complicated than that in the first place. But yeah, so I'd be careful about who you tell that you're trying to learn something.
And yes, I think the group of people that you surround yourself with when you're trying to achieve something is really important, and who you share it with, when, at what stage you share it with, I think does matter. And that's like one of the reasons why we are so um, vigilant with how we curate our own community to make sure that it always maintains to be the kind of place that you can share what you're working on, and there aren't negative effects of doing that. Um, and then on that note of like people telling you that you can't learn something and then you do, for me, like I get this sort of sense of I really like proving people wrong when they think something about me. So
Mm.
I often like to like not tell someone that I'm doing something for a long time because I know what they're going to say most likely until I'm at a level of which it actually seems like I've done something. And then I can be like, this is what I'm working on. I've been doing this. Because then it's like, oh, they can't say you're going to fail because like you already had that like a success that's like impressive enough to be like initially what you were looking for. And I think that is a great feeling, at least for me, to be like, nah, you can't say shit. I did it. What do you mean? You know, at least that initial like boost of you have done something. It was quiet. You did it. That to me is really fulfilling.
Yeah, another reason I'd be careful about it is that other people do not know what is a good use of your time.
Mm-hmm.
And before I moved to Japan, I can't tell you how many times if I did tell someone I'm learning Japanese, that their reaction was some form of, "Oh, that's a waste of time." Because what for? What for? Why don't you learn Chinese? Why don't you learn Spanish?
Yeah.
Why don't you study something that's going to get you a job?
Yeah.
Um, and that's totally fine if they think that, but they don't know what's best for me to learn
Right.
because, I mean, like not to rub it in anyone's face, but like I did get jobs from learning Japanese. I
Yeah.
did my wife from speaking Japanese.
Yeah.
Um, I did get to do all the things I do now because I learned Japanese, which everyone told me was a waste of time. So maybe it's not. And maybe the thing that you want to learn is people are going to think it's a waste of time, but they don't know that either, especially because um, people don't really know what's going to be a valuable skill in the future.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a clue, really.
Yeah.
We have some guesses about what's not going to be a useful skill. It's pretty easy to say things that are not going to be. There's a lot of jobs that we know for a fact humans are not going to do pretty soon, for example. But even then, you don't know if the skill to get that particular job is going to be useful for some newly created job that doesn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, yeah, it just, there's going to be negative feedback. Like if you talk to other people about what you're trying to do, even if they don't think it's negative. And so I think just it requires a lot of mental stability to stay calm and focused on what you want to do.
Right. But that's part of the process of setting out on self-discovery and self-improvement and learning, is that the you by doing so, you're crafting a more stable mind, a more calm mind for yourself. Like it's these two things come together. When you set out to learn something and you commit to it, your mind will become more calm and more stable over time because you'll start proving to yourself that you've actually done something and you can actually do something. And that's a very powerful feeling. I mean, over the
Yeah, I felt
years,
like after I learned Japanese,
yeah.
I really,
And over the years, Nico, like we've gotten a lot of responses from students who say that by learning with us and through, the methodologies that we're teaching, they've unlocked capacities within themselves far beyond just learning Japanese, right? There's people who have been like, this was the catalyst that allowed me to um, pick up other parts of my life and now have a job. Or in some cases, there's like this guy was like, I ended up getting it inspired me to start learning an adjacent skill that got me into a career. I got a career, and then because of the career, I was in a more stable position. And then I met a nice lady, and then that lady became my wife, and then now we have a kid. And it was like, and he was like sent us an email of all people and said that learning with us was the catalyst that he feels was the catalyst to that life change. It's like what? That's amazing.
yeah, that's humbling.
That's I mean I almost get teary eyed because that's crazy to think that there could be that much impact from what we're doing, and like that's how we know
Yeah,
it's important, and that's how we know it's not going to go away, and that's how we know what we're doing is evergreen in that sense because legitimate life change can happen not only in us right? Because I mean, we've followed that path, but also we've been the ones, making this. But it's not just about that. Again, it's about our community, and seeing that kind of stuff happen is literally mind blowing in the best way.
Yeah, it really is.
Quick circle back to
I don't know how we ended up talking
yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah. I don't know either. So I'm gonna make a quick circle back to motivation, and because Ty said something great in Twitch chat. He said a big thing for me was when I dropped a native material that was too tough. When I came back to it a few months later and noticing how much easier it is, that provided him with motivation. And the native material was something he loved anyway, like a game or a light novel. And I think that's another really good strategy. Is like Nico was saying, like find the thing that kind of got you inspired originally, and maybe it's difficult, so maybe even go do it in English, get that inspiration, and then come back like 3 months later and be like, oh, I can understand this. That's wild. Yeah. And then Celtox is saying, I mostly maintained in January, but found my motivation and became more active in the community again. Lots of progress in the last week. The community has been a big motivator for me, being around other people also learning. Yeah, 100%. It's like, yeah, we were just talking about it. It's like, it's huge. It is what it is. It helps us, it helps everyone. And I want to keep growing it as we have.
Yeah, it's great having a community, especially because if you have a question, then someone else has probably had it before and they'll answer it for you quickly, which is awesome.
Yes.
From a practical standpoint, like that's a cool community.
Right. This is totally different tangent, but there's the podcast, Laid Back Japanese podcast that Chie and Tai have been working on. I've got a couple episodes out now. Have you listened to it?
I have. I'm jealous. I just want to be doing that podcast all the time. I don't actually want to like attend meetings to be in the podcast because I have too much other stuff to do.
Maybe someday, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe in like a year or two, you can be on that podcast too.
Yeah. And I'll just make jokes about Japan and Japanese
Yeah,
while other people do things because I'm allowed to be laid back in the laid
100%.
back Japanese.
I'm sure
But yeah,
that's
they're doing an awesome job. And it's pretty much the podcast that I always wanted when I was a student because like I don't know. Sometimes I just didn't feel like studying, but I still wanted to feel like I was being productive. So I had nothing to listen to, and I love podcasts because you can get audio lessons, and they're boring. And if you don't pay attention, you don't know what's going on after a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of them, and I got frustrated and didn't do a lot of them. And then there's something else like like shadow loops, which are really productive, and it doesn't matter if you sort of lose focus because you can come back and it's like just do the next sentence, so it's not a big deal. You don't get lost, but it's still a bit of a grind to do shadow loops, especially if you want to do them for like an hour or something.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Whereas something like laid back Japanese, you could just listen to two people talk and you just happen to learn some Japanese while they do, which is cool.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it too. It's cool.
Yeah, I um digitally met up with Alex from Learn Japanese Pod on Saturday.
Oh,
This last Saturday.
okay. How's he
Yeah,
doing?
and yeah, he's good. And I was reminded of the first time I ever met him. We went out for drinks in Shibuya, like in I think 2016 or something like that. 2015. It was a long time ago, 5 years ago maybe. And he was telling me all how he wanted to like make all these audio courses and stuff. And then I told him, like the main reason I liked your podcast was that you had those fun Friday episodes where I could just chill and just listen to some people talk about Japanese, and it was relaxing. And I remember him being like, "Oh, I didn't realize I was providing that kind of value." And I was like, "Yeah, it was cool, man." So I was just reminded of that just now because, in a way, like laid back Japanese, I think it's more focused on the language than those type of episodes were in his podcast. But I'm reminded of how I used to like listening to those, and I would have devoured laid back Japanese back when I listen to those because I listened to Alex's podcast as a student like in 2011 or something. It's a really old podcast, 2012 maybe.
Yeah. By the way, his podcast is still going and it's still good, and you should listen to it.
Yeah, I don't know how you get those old episodes of his because they're not on like his podcast thing.
Alex, how do we find them?
Yeah, I think he sold them. I think for a while. I don't know if he still does though. But yeah, I used to listen to those way back in the day.
Yeah. This stuff's fun.
So Laid Back Japanese, yeah. Go listen to it. I think it's going to be more popular than our podcast.
Oh, sure. Of course, man. We were talking about this before we got on here. Like, we're not even trying. We just want to.
They already have traction.
Yeah. No, dude, I checked their reviews on Apple Podcast. They already have like 6 like written reviews and like, I don't know, 20 some star reviews. They're like 4.8 stars or something. Oh, who is that person that gave you 2 stars? Why? Okay, but everyone else, it's like there's like 2 4 stars, like 1 2 star, and the rest are 5 star. That podcast is fantastic, and it's only been out for like 2 weeks, and it's already popping off in the reviews on Apple, which is fantastic.
It's suspicious if you only get 5 stars. So
okay, well, thanks, I guess, for the person who gave us 2 stars. I guess like 4.6. I think our podcast has like 2 1-star reviews. Oh man, I don't blame you. It's fine. I love it. I know. I love it. It's all good. You can rate us 1 star. It's fine. I wouldn't mind a couple 5 stars, but you know, some 1 stars to balance it out, as Nico said, is okay. But yeah, it's gonna be more popular than ours for sure, because we're just vibing. You know, like, here to talk about connect. Like, this is our time to connect in a lot of ways about like the business and our ideas and our visions and stuff like that. Like, maybe people don't realize that, but like more than half of it is just so that we have a time that's on our schedule to actually chat.
Yeah, the other half is just that I want to respond to questions from people in our community and respond with my face and my voice. So
and live.
We're human.
Yeah.
And then you can ask me a question and respond. We can have a conversation.
Right. 100%.
What probably for me the main reason I like doing this, because we're not here to get a ton of podcast downloads. We are here to connect with our fellow learners and improve our products.
Exactly.
Which are meant for us.
Because we're here to have a dialogue with you guys, which we literally do because it's live, and enrich the community, and then by doing that, improve the product, and then we all win because we all want the same thing here. But yeah. On that note, should we finish up, or do we want to bring on some more topics? There's a couple more we could cover.
Yeah, although we say this every week, but we have a meeting in like 10
minutes. Shoot. That's so true. I mean, it's probably good because it does keep us at like an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's how we end every episode. We have more stuff to talk about. Oh wait, we have a meeting in 10 minutes. So
yeah, that's true. It's been fun though. This time's been really fun.
So for people that are curious, every Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Japan Standard Time, we have a sync meeting with our whole company where everyone syncs up and we talk about what we've done the last week, what we're doing the next week, and we field questions from other people. And I had this brilliant idea a few weeks ago that everyone needs to write their notes on what they did last week and they're doing next week the day before. And so that way the meeting's more productive, right? Because everyone knows it's going to be about. But the rule is you got to write the notes the day before. And then I have failed to do that 2 weeks in a row now. It was my big idea.
No.
And then there I am on like Tuesday night, and I see Ty being like, "Hey, everyone, don't forget to write your notes for the meeting." And I'm just shark shame because it was my big idea, and then I'm the one who fails to do it every time.
You're slacking over there, sir.
So I wrote the notes right before we did this podcast.
Oh my god.
Fully hoping that no one checked until this morning.
I definitely checked, and I read them, and you were not there, and I did take note of that. But I understand. But the entire company, but especially you and I, are balancing a lot at the moment. So it does make it a bit challenging. But here's to hoping that these new systems and what I'm doing with, working on raising some money for stability. Here's to hoping those things will get us to the place where we can really ride this company out and build it up, grow it to the way we want it to be, and give us more time to actually fill out our meeting notes. I'm sure the rest of the company would appreciate that. So,
and last thing, answer Cinder's question. Yeah, we were talking about Learn Japanese Pod.
Yeah, by Alex.
Alex Brook. And, I had like maybe 2017, I think, 2018. I organized a meetup with students of what was then Nihongo Shark, and Alex came to it. He met a bunch of
our students,
our fellow students, and we all went out for drinks and had a good time. I've known him for a while now.
Yeah, I remember when that happened, and I remember I was in Japan like 3 days after.
Yeah, you missed it.
I just missed it. Yeah, I believe that was the first time I went to Japan. Actually, it was 2017. But yeah, I just missed it, and it was sad times. But yeah. All right. Let's end it there. Thanks everyone for joining us live. Thanks everyone who's listening to this audio only. And thanks everyone who's watching this on YouTube. You're all great. Come join our community because we want to meet you and learn Japanese together and build a company.
Yeah. Or join one of these streams so that we can answer your questions live.
Yes. All right.
Put Caleb on the
spot. Yes, absolutely. All right. Take care.
Not me though. Okay. Yeah, thanks.